Good morning. Welcome to another edition of Inquisition Update. I'm Tom Fresh, your host. You're listening to First Amendment Radio. Thanks for tuning in. We'll continue now where we left off in the book Rome and Civil Liberty by James A. Wiley. We began yesterday a conversation about the convents, the monasteries in Great Britain, and what a scourge they are to any land. And the author gave us one example of a Londoner, a woman, a citizen of England, protected by constitutional liberties, who was interned in a Roman Catholic asylum. And she was taken out of the country against her will, against civil law, and against her natural civil liberties. She was taken out of the country into Belgium, which is a Roman Catholic country, and she was interred into another insane asylum in Belgium. And England initially rose up in arms against this move of this woman, but it was excused because the priest said that there was no evil intent. Okay? So they allowed the Roman Catholic Church to violate constitutional law. The listeners need to be apprised that Belgium is a Roman Catholic country, and she would not, her rights would not exist in Belgium. And there truly was a violation of this woman's rights when she was taken against her will out of Protestant England and taken to Roman Catholic Belgium. And so now we continue on the top of page 192 with a further look at the Roman Catholic convents and monasteries. The author James A. Wiley says, conventual establishments are a double theft. They are a theft of the subjects of the Queen, and they are a theft of the soil of the country. They are, in the first place, a theft of the subjects of the Queen. The community that inhabits the convent, whether great or small, is a community reft from the crown of Great Britain. For within its walls, that crown has no power. The members of that community are no more amenable to the rule of our Queen than if they lived in another country or in another planet. Within the convent walls, another king and another law bears sway, and the conventual members are the subjects exclusively of that king and that law, not in theory only, but in actual fact, inasmuch as recent legislation has guaranteed to British convents perfect exemption from all inspection or intrusion on the part of the law. In doing so, our Parliament has sanctioned not merely the religion of the Pope, but the authority of the Pope. They have thrown the shield of British power around intolerance and illegality. The inmates of our conventual establishments are a distinct and independent nation encamped on our soil, and quite as much an irresponsible and foreign community if they lived in Russia or in Italy or in China. True, outside the walls of the convent, the nun or the monk is amenable to British law. For abuses which the law knows it will correct, and crimes which the law sees it will punish. But inside these walls, and the majority of their inmates permanently live within those walls, the law is absolutely without the slightest control over the monk or the nun. It is alike powerless to punish or to protect. The law may follow them to the threshold of their convent, but there it is stopped. It dare not enter. It is denied the usual means of knowing the crimes that may be there committed, and is forbidden the faculties given it in other cases to discharge its functions as the guardian of the person and the liberty of the subject. Okay, clearly described is the sanctity of these Roman Catholic establishments, the monks, the monkeries, and the nunneries, okay? And the civil power has no jurisdiction in them. This is according to Roman Catholic canon law. And that's why criminality abounds in these institutions. He says, no doubt, if complaint should reach the civil government from the interior of these places, the law has power to open the convent door. But alas, a lofty wall of iron gate encloses the nun. She's watched day and night. She is forbidden all intercourse with her relatives unless once a year in the presence of others. She has gone too deeply down into slavery for cry or groan to be heard from her. There's an awful gulf betwixt her and the law, which she cannot pass. We can no more expect petition or complaint from the interior of a convent or a monastery, although on British soil, than from the heart of Siberia, or the bottom of a French Bastille, or a Roman Inquisition. In fact, every such establishment is a little Siberia, a veritable Bastille, the opprobrium of our liberty, which it affronts, and of our soil, which it pollutes. But in the second place, convents and monasteries are a theft of our very soil. It is stolen very ingeniously, no doubt, but it is still stolen. Every square rood which the convent walls enclose is so much territory lost to British law and to British liberty. It is completely disjoined and dissevered from the rest of the country. It is, in fact, a portion of foreign soil pieced into the free earth of Britain. It is to every practical purpose quite as much a piece of Italy or of Spain as if it lay beyond the Alps or the Pyrenees. For within its limits no law is known save canon law, and no king is obeyed save the monarch of the Vatican. That portion of our country's soil lies as far beyond the scepter of Queen Victoria as if it formed a part of the Papal States. Every inch or acre of a conventual territory is so much abstracted from the domain of the Queen and so much added to the territorial kingdom of Pope Pius IX in Great Britain. And if 1 acre be so abstracted, why not 1,000? Why not the whole country? Okay? Again, reiterating, every piece of property owned by the Roman Catholic Church in this country is foreign. It is as if it was part of the Papal States. The civil government has no jurisdiction. It's as if each piece of land was cut with a cookie cutter and transported to Italy and left a vacuum in its place in the United States of America regarding the civil power. It becomes literal property of the Vatican. It's an embassy, it's an asylum, it's an extension or a state added to the Papal State. And the Pope is its king, and canon law is its constitution. And it's a self-sufficient society, completely separate from the civil power. This is why Roman Catholics, out of one side of their mouth, agree with the Protestant tenet of separation of church and state. But in their definition, the term literally means that the Vatican and its territories are completely immune from influence from the civil power. Okay? That's quite a different distinction from the Protestant understanding. The Protestant understanding of separation of church and state is that man is free to worship God according to his own dictates, and the government may not interfere. In other words, the government may not impose upon us papal tyranny and begin to persecute us in the name of religion, as she did in the Old World Order. So when Roman Catholics talk about separation of church and state, they mean an entirely different thing, and they just leave you to go on believing that they agree with you on the terms separation of church and state. Separation of church and state in the Roman Catholic religion means the church is untouchable by anyone but the Pope. He's the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. So that's what makes it the Church of Antichrist. Now, he continues, no reasoning is needed to show the dangerous and intolerable character of such acquisitions. They are utterly incompatible with the peace and the loyalty as well as the industry of our country. Every acre added to these establishments is so much of our soil annihilated. Nay, better were it that it were annihilated than that it should remain to feed and to clothe and to lodge a body of men who hold a foreign head, who are within their convents and monasteries entirely independent of our authority and law, who contribute not one iota to the nation's wealth or its well-being, and who keep no terms or connection with the country, save to prey upon it always, and to foment treason and sedition now and then. Now you have a better understanding of what a monastery and a nunnery or any other piece of Roman Catholic property in this country represents. Now, under the heading of convents versus habeas corpus, remember, we have the Protestant legal protection called habeas corpus. In other words, you control your own body. That's what habeas corpus means. You have the body. It's under your jurisdiction. It is a protection of civil liberties, natural rights of a man to be secure in his property and his person. We have the law of habeas corpus because the Vatican in the Old World Order never had any respect for anyone's person. They were all considered either subjects of the pontiff and under his jurisdiction and control, or they were heretics. And if they were heretics, they could be rousted out of their bed at 3 a.m. in the morning and taken without being charged and taken to a prison and not given legal representation. They were accused of crimes for which they were to recant, and then they were executed. They had no control whatsoever of their person or their personal effects. Rome has no respect at all for the individual and individual rights. And they are Protestant rights. Okay? Were it not for the abuses of the papacy during the Old World Order, we wouldn't have the liberties of Protestantism. And one of these is habeas corpus. Now, on the 10th of May, 1853, Mr. T. Chambers moved in Parliament for leave to bring a bill for opening both monasteries and convents to the inspection of the authorities. Okay, this is a violation of Roman Catholic canon law, but a member of Parliament brought a bill forward that would mandate the inspection, the state or the civil inspection of these monasteries and convents against Roman Catholic canon law. Now, he says the motion was opposed by the minister of the day, Lord John Russell, but though carried against government, it was never passed into law. On such a question, one might suppose an assembly of Englishmen could come to but one conclusion. Had the question come up as one touching the liberty of the subject, which was its true character, and not as a question involving the prerogatives of the Roman Catholic Church, there would have been found no difference of sentiment respecting it. The Commons of Great Britain would have united as one man in proclaiming the great principle conceded so early as in the days of King John and Magna Carta, afterwards confirmed in the reign of Charles II in the famous act of habeas corpus, and held by all statesmen who have flourished since to be one of the main foundations of British liberty, namely the inviolability of the subject, save by the authority of law. Okay? In other words, habeas corpus, Magna Carta, and even King John, the ancient King John of England, demanded that people have charge over their own persons unless or until they violate the civil law. And then they can be arrested and tried, but only without legal representation, only without having their rights read to them, and only after having legal representation assigned to them. And then they be tried in a court of their peers. Okay? So, under the old world order, there was no such thing as false arrest. The papacy or its priests could arrest anyone they deemed a heretic. All right? So people quaked in their beds at night for fear of the Inquisition that could come in at any time without charge, without warning, without serving a warrant, and take you out of your house, separate you from your wife, your children, and your property, and just deep six you, throw you in a dungeon, and leave you there to rot. All the accusation of heresy was all it took to put that Inquisition in motion. And all of this, the history of England, was designed to restore man some righteous liberties. All right? Now he says, but unfortunately, the question did not come up in this form. It came up as a question affecting the discipline of the Roman Catholic Church. All right? In just a brief recital of what discipline we're talking about, the Roman Catholic Church claims sole jurisdiction over its subjects. And that any time if a Roman Catholic falls under charge by the civil government, the priest can review the case and then refer the case, if they so choose, to a papal tribunal, and then issue its own judgments and its own punishments and sanctions, or let the subject go free. That's what happens in a Roman Catholic country. The church is supreme over the civil power. The Roman Catholic canon law is supreme over the civil laws of the land. Roman Catholic canon law also demands that the discipline of the Roman Catholic Church cannot be meddled with by the civil government. It cannot be amended or altered by the civil government. That the disciplinary system built within Roman Catholic canon law is sovereign. It's the final word, as if God was the one who was doing the judging. All right, so any injustices that were perpetrated by a Roman Catholic priestly tribunal against a subject, the civil power had no jurisdiction to amend the situation. Okay? All right. And the Roman Catholic canon law provides that the church has liberty to use any form of punishment up to burning at the stake. And torture on the rack. Now, we have national and international laws that guarantee freedom of torture, freedom from torture, because we remember the tortures of the Roman Catholic Church. And we took steps to make sure that those abuses could never happen again by the government. See, it was the governments of Europe under papal control that did most of the torturing in the name of the church. The civil power just became the sword of the Roman Catholic Church. And so all of these liberties were won for us by the Protestant Reformation. And here is an attempt to protect the subjects of England from papal tyranny. All right? And he says, thus the element of Romanism was imported into it and wherever that element enters, farewell to all rational and constitutional views on any question that may chance to be discussed. He says, on the approach of that element, there gathers straightway around great principles a thick, opaque atmosphere, impassable to the clearest eye. The heads and hearts of the statesmen give way, and the greatest axioms of civil and religious liberty, in fine, which at other times and in other circumstances is most surely believed amongst men, are first questioned and then denied. Okay, now we saw this same example given when a subject of the crown, a woman, a British national, a British citizen who was interred into an insane asylum in a Roman Catholic nunnery, was taken against her will, against her expressed will, against her constitutional rights, against her habeas corpus rights, by the priest to Belgium, a Roman Catholic country where her rights would be denied. All right? It was excused on the basis of religious liberty for Catholics. It was excused on the grounds that the Roman Catholic Church has the right to discipline her own subjects. And it defies common sense, the common sense God gave a snail to allow the Roman Catholic Church to violate basic civil liberties in a Protestant country. But that's what Great Britain did, and this is what James A. Wiley is speaking about. He says, first, these common sense liberties are first questioned and then denied. This is what happens when Protestants forget their Protestant heritage, forget the persecution of the Roman Catholic Church against Protestants, forgets what the old world order was, and then despite every fiber in their body, they fight for rights for the Roman Catholic Church. And these abuses naturally take place. This is what happens when you fight for the right of Roman Catholics to be Roman Catholic. Roman Catholicism just changes the whole law of the land. It is without law altogether, because you can't even consider Roman Catholic canon law. It contradicts God's holy, eternal, and immutable law. It's not a law, it's a lie. And this is what we're doing in the United States of America. We uphold Catholics as equal Christians, don't we? No one questions the Roman Catholic Church. We're even timid about rehearsing its ancient crimes and its ancient pagan dogmas and its ancient pagan practices, its ancient pagan holidays, its ancient pagan Sabbath. We're not allowed to talk even about the Roman Catholic pedophile priests without being made to feel like we're some kind of an anti-Roman Catholic bigot. We can't even talk about the facts of history, the long-established facts of history of the Roman Catholic Church without feeling like without being made to feel like an anti-Roman Catholic bigot, like someone who does not respect human rights, when in fact the basis of all Protestant understanding and utterance is to preserve the rights whereby Christ has made us free, and to denounce the tyrannies whereby Antichrist has made us all a slave. We'll be back right after the message. You're listening to Inquisition Update on FirstAmendmentRadio.com.
book of Revelation says, "The spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ." This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today, so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy Reality News app. Get it now.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
I know you all want answers, and believe me, so do I, and I'll do my best to get them.
Despite Nicolas Cage's promise to do his best to get left behind rapture answers for us, don't hold your breath. Not everyone believes Left Behind is true prophecy. Some may even regard as conspiratorial the mainstream re-release of the Left Behind movie with actor Nicolas Cage portraying the main character as an attempt to further reinforce in the minds of all this perception of false prophecy in order to condition the masses for the play about to begin. If you want true Bible prophecy answers, get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. The author exposes the Latin rapture origin, the 7-year tribulation deception, true Bible revelation of Daniel's 70 weeks, the abomination of desolation, the restrainer, America in the Revelation, the image of the beast and the mark of the beast, and the truth about God's chosen people, and so much more about Bible prophecy. This book will shatter the Left Behind paradigm of future events. Get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
Okay, recapping a little bit, before we continue, there was a bill brought up in the British Parliament that gave civil power the authority to go into these Roman Catholic institutions, these monasteries and nunneries, to make sure people's rights were protected. All right? But Rome answered that it was an interference of the civil power upon Rome's divine right claim to do its own discipline of its subjects. Okay, there was an element of religion brought into this. You know, you could just hear the Roman Catholics. Oh, religious persecution! They're persecuting the Catholics. They're persecuting the Catholic Church. Okay, civil power is intruding on Roman Catholic territory, papal territory, and meddling with the Church's ability to discipline its own subjects. That was not the intent at all. It was to protect basic civil liberties, particularly of those who wished if they had previously sworn oaths to a nunnery, taken vows of chastity, and all the other appurtenances to becoming a nun, if they wanted to renounce those oaths and return to become a subject once again of the Queen, then the civil power ought to have the authority to liberate that person. If they changed their mind and wanted to come out of the nunnery. All right, but Romanism says, no, you're meddling with the Roman Catholic Church's disciplinary system. This is ordained by divine law. This is ordained by concordat, and I don't believe England had a concordat at this time, but it's always assumed, wherever Romanism is, that the Roman Catholic Church does its own discipline and won't tolerate any interference from the civil power. All right. Now, once that element of religiosity or Romanism was brought into the subject, which completely changed the subject, there became a controversy. He says, thus the element of Romanism was imparted into it. In other words, the debate. And wherever that element enters, farewell to all rational and constitutional views on any question that may chance to be discussed. On the approach of that element, Romanism, there gathers straightway round great principles. There gathers straightway around great principles a thick, opaque atmosphere, impassable to the clearest eye. The heads and the hearts of statesmen give way, and the great axioms of civil and religious liberty, all in fine, which at other times and in other circumstances is most surely believed amongst men, are first questioned and then denied. In other words, people lose their sanity, their ability to reason and think, when the Roman Catholic Church brings up accusations of Roman Catholic persecution and meddling with the divine right authority of the Pope. Reasonable men, otherwise reasonable men, collapse under this kind of pressure and fail to stick to the business of civil government, and that is to preserve the rights of every citizen. Okay, it should have no regard whatsoever to Roman Catholic canon law. And they become sympathetic to religion. And they allow this religion, Roman Catholicism, to violate as a matter of system every basic human right. First, they begin to question those rights, and then they deny those rights. And that is precisely what's happening in the United States of America today. And now it's all perpetrated upon us in the name of giving up some rights to achieve greater security. But this, whether you realize it or not, or admit it or not, this is all about religion. They're turning this into a papal state and making the people believe that Islam is bringing this upon us, when in fact it is Romanism. Islam is just a convenient tool to achieve in this country what the Pope tried personally to achieve in Great Britain 150 years ago. Rome has simply done the same thing and just shift the onus of blame onto the Muslim world. Now, I'm not saying that Islam's not dangerous. Rome couldn't use Islam for this purpose if it were not dangerous. But there's not a whit of difference between Roman Catholic canon law and Islamic Sharia law. Rome knows this. And now Islam just provides a convenient and convincing cover for the Catholicization and the stripping of civil rights, Protestant rights, from the United States of America. Now he says, on the approach of that element, the religious discussion, there gathers straightway round great principles a thick, opaque atmosphere, impassable to the clearest eye. The heads and the hearts of statesmen give way, and the great axioms of civil and religious liberty, all, in fine, which at other times and in other circumstances is most surely believed amongst men, are first questioned and then denied. He says, under the bewildering influence of this element, men seem to forget all they ever learned, and to lose sight of all the acts and privilege and pledges of their public life. See, there's your politicians. They lose their heads when they get to Washington, D.C. They forsake everything they ever learned when they get to Washington, D.C. because the religious discussion takes over. Okay, they forget their Protestant proclivities, and they fall prey to Romanism. He says, under the bewildering influence of this element, men seem to forget all they ever learned and to lose sight of all the acts and pledges of their public life. They sink at once into political dotage and political inconsistency and advocate views which would go to raze, R-A-Z-E, in other words, destroy the whole fabric of British liberty. Can anybody Americanize what I just read? It's a perfect example of what's happened in this country. Because of Roman influence in Washington, D.C., Protestant men, or those of Protestant understanding at least, championing civil liberties, are now convinced that they ought to give up civil liberties for a little tyranny. Those who go to Washington, D.C. with a good intention of upholding the Constitution end up becoming the mechanics of destroying the Constitution. Simply because this element, this religious element, is brought into the discussion. And of course, if you are a politician and you've been trained by the Jesuits in one of the great Jesuit universities in this country, you go to Washington with a purely Jesuitical attitude and a political worldview, or a Jesuitical worldview. And put the two together, what do you get? A direct plunge into tyranny. Global tyranny. Not just for the United States, but for the whole world. And that's the New World Order. He says they sink at once into political dotage and political inconsistency, and advocate views which would go to destroy the whole fabric of British, and in our case, American liberty. There's not one of our leading statesmen who would not manfully resist the crown were it to encroach by a hair's breadth upon the liberty of the subject, and yet an encroachment which they would oppose to the uttermost if made by any of the constituted authorities of the land, they tolerate, nay, they defend, when it is made by the Roman Catholic Church. Okay? You understand what he just said? He says there's not one of our leading statesmen who would not manfully resist the crown were the crown to encroach upon, would encroach by a hair's breadth upon the liberty of the subject, and yet an encroachment which they would oppose to the uttermost if made by any of the constituted authorities of the land, they tolerate, nay, they defend when it is made by the Roman Catholic Church. They completely lose their heads. Anytime the subject of Rome's authority and sanctity and the rights of discipline, the divine right to rule is questioned, the politicians lose their heads and begin to voluntarily give up rights, all in the name of preserving Rome and her liberties. We are enslaved by our own politicians because they have forgotten their Protestant heritage. Okay? And they were sent a message at Vatican Council II that the Protestants have surrendered. There is no more Protestantism. They're all voluntarily, wittingly or unwittingly, and I say majorly unwittingly, placing themselves under the authority of the papacy. So what help, what purpose would it serve to defend Protestant or biblical liberty in a so thoroughly Roman Catholic country? Now you put that sentiment together with the insanity that immediately comes over a politician when the beginning of this element begins to encroach into any discussion. What do you have? A direct plunge into papal tyranny. That's what we're seeing today. It happened in Great Britain. We should be all familiar with it. But it's never discussed. And when it is discussed, people turn the channel. I want to tell my listeners, ignorance is not bliss. Ignorance will not stave the tide of Romanism in this country. Doing the act of the ostrich is no assurance of anything but the success of papal tyranny in this country. And I want my listeners to see, when it comes across the television and the radio and the newspapers, all the liberties that we're losing in this country, you can clearly understand to whom those liberties have been surrendered. The papacy. Now he says, the question touching conventual establishments is exceedingly plain. It is simply this: whether British law shall cover the entire area of British territory, or whether there shall be persons and places to which the jurisdiction and protection of the law shall not extend. This is the question. Stated in this its true form, it is one on which the Constitution has pronounced so distinctly, on which all the great interpreters of the Constitution have pronounced so distinctly, and on which that innate love of liberty, which is a second nature in every Briton, pronounced so distinctly that it will not bear to be discussed. It is so obviously just and right that the power and protection of the law should extend to all subjects of the Queen, and that there should not be a foot's breadth of her soil under the dominion of a foreign code, that the question is admitted even before the discussion begins. There's not one of the opponents of Mr. T. Chambers' motions who dare to grapple with or even to look at the question in this form. They insisted pertinaciously, and some few, we fear, against their better light and convictions, that the motion would lead to restrictions on religious liberty. There never was a grosser misinterpretation of any question. The question has nothing whatever to do with religion. It refers exclusively to personal liberty. The law finds the door of a convent closed against its authority, and it says, quote, every door in the realm must be open to me, in order that my functions as the custodian of the liberty of every man and woman in the kingdom may be discharged. The door of every jail is open to me. The door of every lunatic asylum is open to me. The door of every factory and of every castle and palace in the kingdom is open to me. And this door, which alone of all the dwellings of the realm is closed against me, must be open too. Unquote. And the law is right. Like death, with impartial foot it must cross every threshold, else civil equality and universal personal security cannot exist. The law cannot sustain as an excuse that this being a convent, a papal anathema, like another flaming sword, guards the entrance. It must prosecute its mission of giving personal liberty to all. Now, I will just reiterate to my listeners, had that mentality been applied to the Londoner, the woman who was interred in a Roman Catholic insane asylum, when she was seen publicly pleading for her liberty, not to be taken by the Roman Catholic priests into a foreign country, a Roman Catholic country, that's when the men of Britain should have manned their breeches and stood up and took that woman and given her her liberty, and quit trying to sanction the tyranny of the papacy. Quit giving excuses for the tyranny of papal Antichrist. Christ died that we be free from Satan's tyranny. And they should have protected her liberties and her rights. And God only knows what she suffered when they finally took her to Belgium. And while England was comforting itself and giving an excuse, well, it was for no evil purpose. They should have sent spies into Belgium to find out how that woman was being treated. Would the United States do the same for a Protestant under persecution in the United States of America? I think not. He says, but observe, the law does not interfere in the slightest with any of the ecclesiastical arrangements of the convent. It does not render penal the belief of any papal dogma. It does not abrogate the ghostly authority of the lady abbess. It does not prohibit the taking of the veil or cancel the vows of the nun. It does not interfere with penances even, provided the submission thereto be voluntary. The nun may even lick the dust at the feet of the lady abbess 100 times a day if she so pleases. She may pass whole days in social seclusion and confinement, and wear sackcloth for weeks altogether if she do it of her own free will. She may repeat within her grated chamber as many Ave Marias and Paternosters as she may deem to be for the good of her soul. High-born and delicately bred, she may, if she choose, charge herself with the drudgery of the whole establishment. She may be as happy as she pleases, or as wretched as she pleases. The law will pass by and leave her in the undisturbed possession of her self-sought happiness or her self-inflicted misery. But if she wishes to reclaim her rights as an Englishwoman, the law says, quote, you shall have them. I know nothing of your vow never to leave these walls alive. I know nothing of the canon law which has barred your egress from a fearful anathema. I recognize in you a subject of the British Crown, and I protect you in your right of personal liberty inherent in every British subject. You wish to be free? The door is open. Go forth. Unquote. If this be not a matter appertaining to civil liberty exclusively, don't allow Romanism to plead Roman Catholic persecution and the violation of the Pope's rights. This isn't about Roman Catholicism at all. It's about preserving civil liberties exclusively and having no reference to religious matters whatever. We confess to having lived all our lives in utter ignorance of what constitutes liberty, civil or religious. We are content to rest our case against conventual establishments on this one undeniable fact, that both the law and the practice of these establishments are in violation of personal liberty and come into collision with the most fundamental rights of the British Constitution. Something like an attempt was made to deny this in the course of the discussion in Parliament, but the thing could not be denied. Quote, private liberty, says Delhomme, according to the decision of the English lawyers, consists first First, of the right of property. Second, of the right of personal security. Third, of the locomotive faculty, unquote. A woman, when she takes the veil, when she becomes a nun, loses all three. She becomes as one dead and in the grave. Body and soul, property, person, and locomotion are under the dominion and at the disposal of an absolute and irresistible authority. But it may be said, it is in her power to surrender all her rights if she pleases. This we grant. It is in the ulterior results that the grievance lies. The nun may discover that she has been entrapped into her vow, or she may come to regard it as unlawful, and so wish to recover her rights. And I'll give you another example. What if the nun grabs a Bible and starts to read it for herself in a language that she can understand, and she gets the gospel of Jesus Christ and understands the liberty whereby Christ hath made her free, and then demands to be under Christ's jurisdiction and not the Pope's? What role is it of the civil law at that point? It is the duty of the civil law to liberate that woman. It is the duty of the civil law to liberate you and me and everyone else who opposes Rome. But what are they doing? They're enslaving us to Rome. And that's precisely what the British civil power would have resulted in had Rome been in control completely in England. Britain would have been like the United States is today. He said, it is in the ulterior results that the grievance lies. The nun may discover that she has been entrapped into her vow, or she may come to regard it as unlawful, and so wish to recover her rights. British law says she has the power to do at any moment. She has the power to do so at any moment, recover her rights. But canon law, Roman Catholic canon law, says no, she cannot recover those rights. There is a gulf between her and the outer world, over which the law cannot pass to help her, and over which she cannot pass to obtain the help of the law. For among the rights of which she was denuded, when the black veil descended upon her unhappy head, was the locomotive faculty, unquote. Whatever the mental or bodily torture she may be enduring, she cannot make known her case. Nor is there any power in Britain to compel a lady abbess, the superior nun of the nunnery, to produce her for the satisfaction of her friends. No one can demand that the head abbess, the mother superior of a nun, must take one of her nuns and liberate her, or at least bring her forward for questioning, so that the civil government may inquire whether she is there under her own will or whether she is being compelled against her civil liberties. You get a better understanding what civil liberty is designed to do? It does well until Rome interferes, and then it becomes a tyrant. And until the United States and the citizens of the United States, and particularly Protestants, wake up, tyranny will dominate. Despise Christ's liberty, and you become a subject of Rome. I'll see you tomorrow.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.